Shalom Aleichem. The next series of proofs that Judaism is true is perhaps the most compelling evidence, the Nivot, prophecies of the future. Before you dismiss this, I'm aware that other religions and individuals have prophesied about the future, and that one of the ways that they make their prophecies seem true is by being very vague. However, the following prophecies are precise and the interpretation clear. Without further ado, the Kotel Hamaravi, aka the Western Wall. In Shir HaShirim Rabbah 226 and Bamidbar Rabbah 11.2, and no later than in the 8th and 12th century respectively, is prophecy that Hashem will never allow the Kotel to be destroyed, and to this day, from the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash Holy Temple and the second destruction, and then that area being owned by different Gentile empires throughout history until today by the Palestinians, we see that the Kotel is still intact. Next is the prophecy of being an eternal nation. In Bereshit, Genesis 17:7, Hashem established an everlasting covenant with Avraham Avinu, our father, and his descendants, the Jews. And we see throughout history powerful empires like the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, they're all gone. Yet we Jews are still here, thank God. Not only that, but we're the only people in world history to be exiled from our homeland twice and survive, and eventually return to our homeland. Next is scattered and few in number. Take into account Deuteronomy 4:27, prophesying that the Jews would be scattered among the nations and isolated from each other, which happened after the destruction of the first and especially after the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash Holy Temple in 586 BC and 70 CE respectively. There's also the Nevuah prophecy that we, the Jews, will remain few in number compared to the nations of the world, which has remained true to this day. Eventually, such a nation just completely assimilates. The ancient civilizations that still exist today are due to increasing their numbers and remaining together geographically, such as the Chinese and Indians. Really think about that. Exiled throughout the whole globe and few in number, that makes a nation's chances of survival minimal, if not impossible. Such a nation eventually just assimilates. Next is persecution and light unto the nations. Devarim, Deuteronomy 28:65-67 prophesied that we'd be persecuted during our exile, which if you know Jewish history, that has definitely come true. Yet, in Shemot 19:5-6 and Yeshayahu 42:6, Jews will be a light unto the nations, and looking back on history, that's definitely come true. Our Tanakh, Hebrew Bible, has been translated into over 700 languages and is the best-selling book in history. We've held positions in government since the Babylonian exile until this day, despite our consistently small numbers. And Judaism has had a major positive influence on the Western world and to a lesser extent the Middle Eastern world. Their views of morality, religious beliefs, social justice, and law. For example, our influence on the United States Declaration of Independence stating that all men were created equal. Before our influence, the commonly held belief was might makes right, survival of the fittest. Even to this day, Jews have the highest Nobel Prize per capita, and we're responsible for much of the entertainment business, having created many popular comic book characters, movies, and creating the Barbie doll. In 1998, the city of Tel Aviv in Israel was one of the 10 most technologically influential cities in the world. In 2019, Israel was ranked the world's 5th most innovative country by the Bloomberg Innovation Index. Next is revival of the land of Israel. In Shemot, Exodus 3:8, and throughout the rest of the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is praised for being a land flowing with milk and honey and its fruits. Even until the time of Josephus in the 1st century CE, the land of Israel was still prosperous and fertile. In Leviticus Vayikra 26:32-33, it was prophesied when the Jews would be exiled, the land of Israel would become barren and desolate, and that's exactly what happened. After the Churban Bayit Sheni, the destruction of the Second Holy Temple, for almost 2 millennium, empire after empire tried to work the land of Israel to make it fertile, to make it inhabitable, but to no avail. When Mark Twain visited Israel in 1867, he was met with disappointment when he saw how much of the land was just desert and uninhabitable. And yet the Navi, the prophet Yechezkel, in 36:8-11 prophesied that when the Jews return to the land will re-blossom. Come on, seriously, what are the odds of that happening? And yet look, less than 80 years ago, that's exactly what happened. Perhaps controversial, but next is the revival of Hebrew. Since the Babylonian exile, Hebrew was no longer the primary language spoken by Jews, and over time it became a language of the Sfarim, Judaic writings and prayer in the early Common Era. And yet, Zephaniah in chapter 3, verse 9, prophesied that Hashem will change the world to speak a pure language and acknowledge Hashem as the one true God. Metzudah David and Im Ezra comment that this is a nevuah, a prophecy, that in the Messianic age, everyone will speak Lashon HaKodesh, Hebrew. In other words, we're going to have a language that's not spoken anymore be revived. And that's exactly what we see. Never before in world history have we seen a language cease to be and be revived, like modern Hebrew. However, there are those that don't view modern Hebrew as Lashon HaKodesh. I myself am not really sure yet whether to view it as Lashon HaKodesh or just a dialect of it. I will say that regardless of how one views modern Hebrew, in my opinion, the evidence is clear, especially keeping Hashgacha Prati, divine providence, in mind, the evidence is clear that some form of Hebrew has been revived for a significant reason. It is taught that Hashem can bring the Mashiach, the Messiah, in a supernatural way or in a more natural way, depending on our zechuyot, on our merits. If in a natural way, modern Hebrew is at least setting the precedence or example for our rabbis to do similar in the future in restoring Lashon HaKodesh as a spoken language and fulfilling this prophecy. So while modern Hebrew isn't spoken universally right now, and maybe another revival of Hebrew will take place in the future, that will be universal. Either way, we still have the Hebrew language, again, as a spoken language that's readily available for this nevuah, for this prophecy to be fulfilled. Whereas beforehand, over 2,500 years ago, until approximately 200 years ago, Hebrew wasn't a spoken language among the masses. For more on the status of modern Hebrew, stay tuned for a video I'll make in the future, B'ezras Hashem. The last nevuah prophecy of this video, the ingathering. In Devarim, Deuteronomy 31-5, it's prophecy that the Jews would be exiled due to our many sins, and Hashem will return our exiles towards the end of days, and that's exactly what we see happening. Rabbi Reuven Chaim said in a shiur, in a Torah lecture, that the Ramban Nachmanides, when he visited Eretz Yisrael in 1268, he had to go to different cities just to make a minyan, to pray. A quorum of 10 men. That's how few Jews there were back then. The first significant aliyah was in 1882. Then there were a few more waves of aliyah before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. At the time of the establishment, there were 650,000 Jews, and in the next year, there were, at that time, the largest ever number of Jewish immigrants in a single year, 249,954 that arrived in Israel, known in Hebrew as Kibbutz Galuyot. According to JewishAgency.org, as of 2021, 45.3% of Jews worldwide live in Israel. That's almost half of world Jewry. And the number keeps increasing, as we'd expect, knowing this was prophesied. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share, feel free to comment. Kol Tuv.